Everybody settle down. Make sure you can see and hear, and everybody's got a good sight line and everything. I want to welcome you all to our Memorial Day exercises. We're going to begin today with the singing of America the Beautiful, accompanied by our wonderful school band. Wonderful as always. And for our invocation today, it's my privilege to introduce the Executive Director of the Women's Support Services, the Reverend Betsy Morrow.
Let us gather ourselves in a spirit of honoring remembrance. Eternal One, whose presence is mystery and whose promise is hope, we lift up the men and women who gave their lives in defense of our country. In the act of remembering, we remind ourselves of those things we should never take for granted: freedom, service, duty, and honor. If we forget the sacrifices of our sons and daughters, mothers and fathers, neighbors and friends are no more than the ashes of history. So it is right that we are here this day, at this time, in this way. Sanctify our tributes and the hopes for peace that come with them, not only for our sake, but for all around the globe. Amen.
Thank you, Betsy. And now, let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Again, it's my privilege to announce our speaker today, the Program Director at Women's Support Services, Virginia Gold.
Good morning. It's an honor to be speaking today, as well as very intimidating, I confess. In looking through some files, I discovered that both my grandfather and my uncle have spoken at this event, and I will endeavor to uphold the standards they set, but potentially be shorter. I would like to invite you back to the 1860s here in the United States, a time when we were anything but united. There were no social media platforms on which to tweet, post, and snap our disagreement about slavery. No television images flashed across the globe to capture individual and communal commentary. No opinion polls and mass marketing shaped political messaging. Instead, our country engaged in a very personal argument. Our ancestors ultimately chose to send their young men into a bloody and protracted battle that would determine the legal and ethical foundation of our country's economic system and created the basis of our state and national powers. Over 620,000 soldiers died in that conflict, with almost as many wounded as families and communities were literally ripped apart. When it was over, slavery was legally abolished in our nation, and our country has spent more than a century and a half trying to abolish its effects in practice as well. Shortly after the end of the Civil War, as my family lore goes, my great-great-grandfather, Theodore S. Gold, read a story about women in Columbus, Mississippi, decorating the graves of both Union and Confederate dead at a local cemetery in 1866. This was no small act of forgiveness. It was a specific and courageous choice to honor the lives of all who had died, regardless of their beliefs. It was the choice to invite grace into the relationships of those left behind, to heal the bitter and deadly divisions. It was a choice to live forward in honor of those who had given their lives. Theodore responded by gathering people in the North Cornwall graveyard to do the same for the 6 local Civil War dead buried there at that time. Family lore is a little unclear if that first gathering was in 1867 in response to that article, or if our ceremony began the following year after General John Logan, National Commander of the Grand Army of the General Order Number 11, which said in part, quote, "The 30th day of May, 1868, is designated for the purpose of strewing with flowers or otherwise decorating the graves of comrades who died in defense of their country during the late rebellion, and whose bodies now lie in almost every city, village, and hamlet churchyard in the land. In this observance, no form of ceremony is prescribed, but posts and comrades will, in their own way, arrange such fitting services and testimonials of respect as circumstances may permit." Regardless of exact date of origin, family history is clear. I am the 5th generation of Golds to lead this now 150-year-old tradition in the North Cornwall Cemetery, to which all are invited. Initially, the Decoration Day ceremony was to honor the Civil War veterans. North Cornwall Cemetery now holds a dozen men who had fought in that war. When our nation became involved in World War I, Decoration Day was expanded to recognize veterans of all wars, and in 1968, the 3rd Monday in May was declared a federal holiday. My family's observance over time has added in 6 veterans of the Revolutionary War, and then the First World War, 15, the Second World War, 34 men and 1 woman, followed by the Korean and Vietnam conflicts, 10 and 1 veterans respectively. In addition to those American veterans, we also decorate the graves of 2 German veterans in keeping with the original spirit of those women in Mississippi. This morning, we remembered a total of 85 men and women who served in their nation's armed forces in a multitude of ways. The original brief ceremony now takes almost an hour to move about the cemetery and tell the stories collected over the decades. It should be noted that Skip Lush personally oversees the placement of flags on the grave sites of those veterans, as well as hundreds of other graves in 10 sites around town each year. There are many more to remember. Gordon asked me to share my family's ceremony today, and I wanted to end by speaking a moment to why I think it is a vital one to continue. Dad picked a theme every year, but he always returned to one final point for us, the living. In my uncle's speech here, he spoke of it as well, the idea of stewardship. The veterans who are remembered each year in North Cornwall Cemetery, the seamen whose lives are held up at the covered bridge, and those we honor here now on the green, believed that the idea of democracy was worth living their lives for. But they also knew that if they survived the wars they fought in, they had the responsibility to return home and create the reality of democracy on a daily basis. They returned from war to resume lives as farmers, business owners, educators, parents, medical personnel, politicians, lawyers, church leaders, and civic volunteers of all kinds. We benefit today in an endless number of ways from their dedication to building a community here in Cornwall after they fought for it abroad. And we are responsible for our stewardship of this community they created. I don't believe war is an effective solution to conflict. I pray often that our current world leaders find ways to solve conflict without tearing apart another region of the world. And I hope fervently that no more of the people I love will have to die in any future war. And Memorial Day is also one of the most important days in my year. A day to remember those who risked their lives to ensure I had the freedom to speak here today. A day to celebrate and honor that before and after the wars, there are plenty of ways for us all to create democracy and seek justice in our daily lives. To steward our Earth's clean water and land and the ability to produce healthy food. To advocate that education and knowledge are accessible to all. To increase access to housing, medical care, fair wages, and good jobs. To nourish relationships free of violence in our homes and communities. To work for true equality and justice regardless of skin color, class, gender identity, country of origin, sexual orientation, or religious beliefs. Today in North Cornwall Cemetery, at the covered bridge and here on the town green, we have gathered to remember. We will gather again in a year to remember and honor. In the intervening year, may we each use the example of those in the past to now build the future they hoped for. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. Thanks for that reminder of Cornwall's dedication to this day. Now, the Citizenship Award, it has my name here that I'm announcing, but what I'm announcing is the announcer. It's my pleasure to introduce your fire chief, Freddie Scopel.
Good morning. Each year, Cornwall Veterans of Foreign War Post 9856 selects a person to honor their citizenship to this town, be it for an act of heroism or duties served in terms of years of local boards, departments, storm cleanups, or possibly just being a good neighbor. The individual does not necessarily have to be a resident of town, but has to serve the town in many different capacities. Today's recipient of the Cornwall Citizenship Award was born in July 1956 and raised on the shores of the Houstonic River. He grew up causing trouble on Swaller Hill while attending Sharon Center and Oliver Wolcott High School. In the late 70s, he joined the Army and he spent time stationed in Germany. After his tour in the Army, he came back to his hometown where he married his wife and raised a wonderful family. He started to work at the town of Torrington in the highway department and then moved to the Park and Rec department. Sorry, close. After leaving the town of Torrington, he followed a dream and opened a business serving the town of Cornwall. Many people in town would know him from his years of dedicated service in the Cornwall Volunteer Fire Department. He's been in the department for 25 years, where he has served on many truck committees to develop the apparatus that just passed in front of you a few minutes ago. He also served as chief of the department for many years. Currently, he's serving the department as fire lieutenant and president of the company. It is my great pleasure to present this year's Citizenship Award to Earl Douglas Tyler. Congratulations, Earl.
You're totally flabbergasted. No words, but thank you.
more well-deserved. And now for the honor roll. David Bestoni, U.S. Marine Corps, Vietnam, died June 19th, 2017. Norman Dorson, U.S. Army, Korea, died July 1st, 2017. John Zabi Zabriskie, U.S. Air Force, died August 17th, 2017. Forrest Woody Woodman, U.S. Navy, World War II, died December 20th, 2017. Alfred Shore Dietzel, U.S. Army, died March 16th, 2018. And Jacek Galaska, the Polish Armed Forces, World War II, died May 18th, 2018. And now for caps. benediction, the Reverend Betsy Morrow.
Let us gather our hearts in reverence. As we leave this time of sacred remembering, may the memories of sacrifice remain in our hearts. May the honor of duty inspire us to the same. And may the example of bravery encourage us in our own acts of courage to transform our world in peace and hope, however and wherever we are called. Amen.
Thank you again, Betsy. Thank you all for coming and celebrating this Memorial Day. And now go have a lot of fun over at the carnival. Thank you.